Alright, so as I'm sure most of you already know, most of my content is about Bluey. Big surprise, I know. I obviously enjoy talking about the show, including its stories, characters, and even odd tidbits of lore, such as how the Jingle Bells short implies that Batman is canon, or that there was a cut line in Shadowlands referencing Jesus. But with the show going on what I think is a hiatus or break, and traffic for my channel being somewhat slow right now, I thought now would be the perfect time to review something else. Something totally different, you know, just to change it up a little. So anyways, what will we be checking out this time? Okay, this was not what I was expecting. What is this anyways? Well, it's none other than Chip Chilla, a show that's still relatively new, as the episodes were released just in October of this year, I think. And despite the show not being necessarily the most popular, it has been getting lots of attention online, and not quite for the right reasons, with people calling it everything from a Bluey ripoff to conservative children's propaganda? And at first, this sounds incredibly outlandish, but once I began to look into it, things began to get interesting, as the show was created by the Daily Wire, a company known for promoting a right-wing agenda, and upon watching the episodes themselves, the show, and especially its art style, seemed to have some, let's just say, very familiar details. Now, with that in mind though, I should get this out of the way and mention that, despite the context, this is not meant to be a political video. I am nowhere near an expert on politics, and I am not here to promote any political views I have, or disregard the beliefs of others. So if you're one of those people who likes to constantly spout their political beliefs in every comment section, here's the door. There are places for political debate, but this isn't one of them. However, for those who are more mature and respectful, y'all are good, you can stay. But with that said, let's get back to the main topic, and figure out what's really going on. Is this really some kind of right-wing children's propaganda, riding the success of Bluey? Or is it just another forgettable, generic kids show that people online are getting way too upset at? Well, in today's video, I'll be trying my best to answer these questions, and even give my thoughts on the show itself, as I did watch every single episode.
That's great, Dad.
The things I do for this channel. But anyways, let's begin. So in order to get a real understanding of where all of this discourse even came from, I think it's best to go over what the show is even about and where it came from. To start, looking at IMDb, where the show has a pretty mediocre rating already, the summary about it seems pretty normal at first, with a description simply stating that the show is a, quote, comedic preschool series celebrating the day-to-day lessons of Chip and his homeschooling family of energetic chinchillas. And from this, I guess you could argue that the premise is kinda similar to Bluey, but I'd argue that most family or kids cartoons do something similar. Also, I have heard that some people do consider the homeschooling aspect a conservative element, which, considering the show's background, is likely intentional, but considering that people homeschool their kids for a variety of different reasons, political or not, I wouldn't personally consider this a notable element. However, when we look into the production of the show, we really start to see why some people might be up in arms. Because as mentioned before, the show was produced by the Daily Wire, a company that is known for producing news, content, and media with a conservative agenda. And of course, the company itself was founded by Jeremy Bowen and Ben Shapiro, who I'm sure you're familiar with for a variety of reasons. Once again, trying to be neutral here. Alright, so I apologize for the different audio quality, but I was working on this video and I just realized that Jeremy Bowen's actual name is Jeremy Boring. Somehow I made a really dumb typo in my script and I messed up, so sorry about that. And while I won't discuss the company's whole history that much, I do feel inclined to mention BentKey, which if you don't know, was an application recently released by the Daily Wire, which can be used to stream a variety of children's programming by the group, including our newest topic, Chipchilla. But from what I've heard from random people online, which admittedly is not the most reliable source, some people have been saying that the show isn't meant to teach political ideas, even considering its origin, as this whole BentKey thing was just made as some alternative to the so-called woke programming of stuff like Disney or even Netflix. And I have to say, while some of its themes could definitely be interpreted as conservative ideas if you look at it a certain way, I didn't really notice the show like bashing audiences on the head with direct messages about particular political topics or controversial ones. But with that said, upon watching the actual show, I have to say that despite everything I was and wasn't expecting, it's just really dull. Because as mentioned before, it's not extremely obvious about its political intentions or background, and in my honest opinion, it's basically just Bluey, but worse. Well, kind of. Because there are a few differences, like there's 3 kids instead of 2, and instead of being a girl, the protagonist is a boy. Also, I just realized that all of the male characters in the family are this kind of blue color, and all of the female ones are like purple or something. Which is funny since people always assume Bluey is a boy because of her blue color.
Oh yeah, 'cause he's blue.
I'm a girl!
But here I guess it fits people's expectations, I guess. However, speaking of expectations, the best way I can describe Chipchilla is that this show is pretty much what everyone thinks Bluey is, before they've actually watched it.
Huh?
As the whole thing about a wholesome animal family, reenacting stories and playing games is there, but all of the creativity, raw emotion, and mature takes on life Bluey has that got audiences so hooked really isn't. Because the show, at face value, is technically sorta okay. And yeah, Bluey does have its slower or more basic episodes, especially in its early days. But regardless, Chipchilla is definitely still a few good steps behind. Like to start, the characters for the most part exist. The sister and the mom sometimes do stuff, but they're usually just kinda there. And with the main character Chip, well, every episode pretty much has him act selfish or cocky, mess up, and then he learns his lesson. And it gets old pretty fast, because that's all that really happens. And regarding the dad, who's voiced by Rob Schneider, was probably my favorite character if I had to choose one. Now, of course, he's not anywhere close to Bandit in terms of looks or character, but he's alright. He's mainly just a happy, glad to be there guy who usually just pushes the story along and introduces the theme. And if anything, he's really more of the show's host than an actual parental figure, especially since we really don't see the parents do that much parenting stuff, at least not on the more realistic scale of Bluey. And speaking of realism, if there's one notable difference between the two shows, it's that Chipchilla seems to be a bit more on the cartoony and crazy side, which in itself isn't inherently a bad thing, and does make it just a little bit different, but can lead to some interesting moments, such as in the episode Chilla Swap, where the kids and parents switch roles, which leads to the kids turning the thermostat to literal freezing temperatures,
That's great, Dad.
and nearly burning the house down with a waffle maker, all because their parents are staring at a waffle on the ceiling. Yeah, to say the least, I don't think Bandit and Chili would ever let something like that happen, because they're not completely insane, but I guess Chum Chum is. Also, yeah, that's actually the dad's name. I'm not even joking. Also, another favorite moment was the one where they kinda held a competition in the backyard, not totally unlike Obstacle Course, where Chip gets absolutely demolished by a flying ball. That was pretty funny, but speaking of similarities, I should address the elephant in the room, which is that the art style looks suspiciously familiar. Like, okay, it could be a coincidence, but the appealing and natural pastels, along with everything being made of these rounded off rectangles and circles, really does remind you of another, better show. I mean, even the layout of their dining table is spot on, all of which is especially funny as early on, the show was clearly meant to have a different style, but for some reason they changed it. And I feel like even a couple of the jokes and scenes are oddly familiar, such as one scene where the dad eats a giant meal made by the kids and gets sick, or an episode with a grumpy senior at a garage sale. Although, to be fair, the latter is kinda different, because Mr. Rabbit turns out to actually be a pretty cool guy. Like, I'd vibe with him any day. But other than the art style and the occasional scene, that's really where the main differences end. And from this point is where I really begin to wonder, why does this show exist? What purpose does it serve? Because apart from some possibly underhand, generic kids show messages, the show isn't trying extremely hard to promote a political idea, or be that different from Bluey, because overall, despite obviously being set in the United States, there isn't really that much reference to American culture or family life, outside of some episodes about history or literature. And it really just feels like, apart from flags everywhere telling you this is American, it could really be set anywhere. And even with that said, it's not like the idea of taking another show's premise and giving it a cultural or creative spin can't work, because that's basically what Bluey did. It essentially took the concept of Peppa Pig and gave it a setting naturally showcasing Brisbane life without being too obvious, and along with it, introduced a new level of depth and maturity. But with Chipchilla, it just got the most basic premise of it and didn't change much, apart from being more chaotic, yet somehow also watered down at the same time. As the characters are relatively simple, the plots are often repetitive, and the art style was just reminding the audience of a much better show. And on top of that, it's not even like most conservatives dislike Bluey, or that the show has gotten into controversy over any supposed woke messaging, as I don't really identify with politics that much, but have many friends on both sides, all of whom, despite their opposing beliefs, are huge fans regardless. So outside of people not wanting to buy Disney Plus, it seems like the show really doesn't serve a purpose, or add anything significant outside of kinda partially copying Bluey. And even then, you can just buy the episodes or use a VPN to watch them on other services. Dang. Now that right there could have made a really good sponsor segue. But regardless, that's really my overall thought on the show so far. Kinda like Bluey, and definitely heavily inspired in its art style, but overall lacks the charm and maturity that made the former such a huge success, along with not adding much, both politically or creatively. And with that, those are some of my thoughts on Chipchilla, the kinda, sorta Bluey copycat produced by a conservative media outlet. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below, but for the love of all that's good, please keep it civil. I'm begging you. But from there, my name's Hideaki, and I'll be signing out. Have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you soon. Bye, everyone. And before I go, Chum Chum Pillow.
They have redirected and focused all their strength somehow!
So, for today's art of the day, we have this nice sketch by user Hats Off to You from Twitter. They mentioned that this was their first ever fan art for any YouTuber. And with that, I just have to say, hats off to you for creating this amazing drawing. Thank you very much.